challenges that you think the attendees should know about when they consider trans and non-binary experiences in the workplace or even in the job search?
Finding your community of support is so important, because there are so many trans people on this call, and so sometimes, I want to talk to the employers too, but that is something that you really need to look at, is where are you going to get your support network, and are there people that you can see as your advocates and co-resistors in that workplace. But I also personally, I love the title. In the last month, I have gotten 3 requests for corporate webinars explicitly and only about pronouns. And I have to explain that is something that is part of a discussion, but it's not the discussion. The discussion is things like benefits policies, looking to make sure that they're actually trans inclusive. A number of benefits providers are actually creating trans inclusive plans at this point. So Sun Life, Manulife, actually have some of these plans that are explicitly trying to become trans inclusive. You need to be looking at your data. Like your data, if you do not represent and track your trans and gender diverse and non-binary communities, how are you going to know what their experience is, or if they're being left out? And I think a lot of employers, until one of their staff explicitly says, hey, I'm trans, they make the assumption that there aren't trans people there. And so employers really need to be proactive when it comes to these pieces like policies and data and benefits, and providing also these communities care, which sometimes can come through an employee resource group and sometimes has to be really informal.
I'd say that it's leadership management that becomes the bigger barrier in terms of almost forcing or pigeonholing trans non-binary employees to be the people to get leadership buy-in, because that will never work. And that should never be pressure put onto the employees to advocate for themselves. It has to be the organization's, so I'm talking to the HR folks on the line here, it has to be the organization's responsibility to take that on. To hire from outside, not not to sell myself here at all, but to understand the power dynamic that exists when you'd expect any employee, internal folks, to do any of that kind of inclusivity work. So that also includes the employee resource group. Just because it exists, it doesn't mean it is going to be effective. I mean, if anything, that should not be the go-to place for any type of diversity and inclusion work changes across the organization. It has to come from top down, and for the employees to then, of course, have buy-in. But at the end of the day, having done coaching for executives too, that is where I've seen the most success.
Yeah, so speaking from personally my freelance experience, and this is something that's also referenced in the transitioning employers report, is the tokenization that is very rampant when it comes to freelancing. Sorry. So when you advertise yourself as anyone, an illustrator, creative, whatever, as someone who is trans and non-binary, you get sought out for work because you are trans and non-binary, which can be great, not great, because organizations want to hire people who are trans and non-binary because they understand that need, but at the same time, they want us to do work for either no pay or very little pay, which is extremely problematic, because it's saying that you want us for who we are, but you don't want to actually value us. And this is extremely problematic because, yeah, for what I just said, it's very problematic. And I feel like I see a lot of calls for artists and calls for whatever, and it includes doing a lot of we're holding submissions for this magazine publication and we want to hear from trans and non-binary people. please submit completed works by this date, and maybe you'll have a chance, and maybe we'll give you a $50 honorarium. And it's like, no, you can't ask people to do spec work. You can't ask people to do work for free. You can't ask people to do work for very little compensation.